Rudolf Hess, testified at the International Military Court in Nuremberg, as well as in his own case. Adolf Eichmann had complete rule of the lot and fate of Jews sent by him, those who were known as transport Jews, Transportjuden. Correct. Auschwitz was at the time included camps conducted by the Office for Economy and Administration. And the commanders of those camps, when, if we may call this acting and fulfilling a task, did obey orders given by Paul. But orders as far as the fate and lot of those deported to the camps, their reception, their release, to keep them on and on or to send them on immediately, all this was in the hands of the deporting office, and this is the order which was kept until the very end. This we know from Hess, and this we know from the official directives of the head office for economy and administration reporting the transports. Eichmann instructed, according to Hess, to keep the Terezin deportees in the family camp at Auschwitz for a number of months. We were told here by Yehuda Bakon what this family camp meant. This camouflage worked again. The aim was that they write letters and calm and soothe their families back home. The letters were dictated by Gestapo men. Full corroboration is found in Hess' testimony, T1356. Page 19. Eichmann supervised personally the deportations, and he laid down the date for their killing in gas chambers. I do not say that he was the man to decide and fix a date for each individual person when he would be sent to the gas chamber. This was too much. But which deportation, which transport will be taken directly to the gas chambers, and which transport or deportation will be held for a time in a family camp? This was entirely in his hands, except for very special cases. When Gizzi Fleischmann was sent to Auschwitz, she came with the special order, return undesirable. R.U. Rückwärts unergänzlich. Conrad Morgan, the examining judge of the SS, after visiting Auschwitz and other extermination camps, he gave the order to arrest Eichmann. And the witness Rajewski, a Polish prisoner who was kept busy in the political department, that is, the department registering the inmates of Auschwitz, testified that all deportations arriving to this camp, all Jewish deportations, including the general government, were all marked 4B4. This is T1356. Eichmann himself admitted and confessed before the court that he visited Auschwitz 5 or 6 times. since, except Hess' testimony, I have nothing more, I shall be content with this number stated by the accused himself. What did he do at Auschwitz? Why an officer in charge of timetables has to visit this camp? Why does he have to come to this camp 5 or 6 times at least? If all he has to receive is the order, Auschwitz, in order send on the deportees, why does he have to come to Auschwitz and observe and watch the operations there? But his version is not correct, Your Honors. When he said in those parts to Zassen, called by us File 17, he would visit Auschwitz every time a large new transport arrived, and when another matter or problem had to be settled at Auschwitz. He would come to see how things were operated at this death camp, Auschwitz. This is the reason for his visits. Because as far as timetables are concerned, there was no need for him to visit Auschwitz. He admits with his own mouth at the police interrogation and confirmed when cross-examined by me that he did not take part even at one sitting of the Ministry of Railways in regard to timetables. This was done by Novak on his behalf. And not only those transported from Terezin were kept at Auschwitz in a family camp to serve a part of this great camouflage undertaking, but others as well. We remember the Walze postcards, when deportees were ordered to send them to their relatives as though they were in peace. We remember the articles published, written by Fritz Fiala, the Slovakian, which Wisliceni requested Fiala at the order of Eichmann to calm the Slovakian population, the Jews and the government as well. And Fiala, after a visit to Auschwitz, wrote and said it was a convenient place, people were happy in their work, and their life is convenient and pleasant. And when the Institute for the Research of Ancestry needed skeletons for the collection at Strasbourg, Eichmann is the man to be approached. And when Sievers was questioned, the case against Sievers, why did he apply to Eichmann in this matter? He answered that the chief superintendent of concentration camps, Glix, was the man to refer him to Eichmann. Once again the question, why did Sievers order Eichmann to supply the skeletons? And if the version put forward by the... What reason had Sievers to say that he was referred to Eichmann or to shift the blame onto Eichmann? And if Eichmann's version is correct, that all this was not within his competence or jurisdiction, and if his answer was, I do not deal in skeletons nor in skulls, why did Sievers follow his application once again in writing after a couple of months? repeating the same request.
Sievers
requested skulls and skeleton for the anatomical collection.
Sievers
discussed the matter with Ginter. There was a kind of break in the whole negotiations, but from T1363 we understand that Dr. Berger, who dealt with the same matter at Auschwitz, there was a kind of epidemic at Auschwitz and this could not be carried on. And after a number of months, the application is renewed once again in writing and again to Eichmann. The accused tries to find shelter, and this against so much evidence and proofs against him. He says a secret mission assigned to Ginter by Miller. And if Office 4 had no connection with Auschwitz, why should Miller assign the supply of gas or the supply of skulls and skeletons on anyone, let it be Ginter or anyone else? Besides this general question, then the version does not stand proof in the face of two facts. When Sievers approached Dr. Brandt in this matter, one of the head medicos of the SS, he attached a draft of an application to Eichmann in the same matter. And Brandt did refer to Eichmann. According to the draft put before him, can we really think that the peak and summit of the commanders of the SS did not know who was competent and who was in authority? Refers to a man who has no connection with such matters, and the draft itself is being prepared. The draft and the letter which has to be addressed to His Highness Adolf Eichmann. This is the way to write to His Eminence, and he will supply the skeletons. And these are the heads of the command, the man at the top. Therefore, his version here is not acceptable, and the fact that Sievers applied to him once again in writing proves that he could not say to Sievers, I am not competent, because had he said so in the first instance, Sievers would not have applied to him once again. And
I wish to announce the order of the coming sessions. At the request of the two sides, the following arrangements were agreed. This afternoon there will be no session. The Attorney General will complete his summing up in tomorrow's first session, tomorrow morning. Then there will be a break until Monday. And the Counsel for Defense will probably begin and end his summary pleading on Monday. As we have been told, it may take only the morning session on Monday. Mr. Hausner, please proceed now.
ועתה, שופטיי ורבותיי, לעסקה
Honorable
המפורסמת,
judges,
דם
to the
תמורת
famous
סחורה.
transaction of blood against goods.
משא ומתן על הצלת חיי
Negotiations for the
יהודים
saving of Jewish
תמורת
lives
תשלום כספים
against the
ומסירת
payment of
נכסים
monies and the
ל-SS
handing over of
התנהל
property to
בכמה
the
דרכים.
SS were conducted
דוח
in
קסטנר
many
מדבר
ways.
על כך
The
באריכות,
Kustner report speaks about this at length,
ימצא בית
and in the
המשפט
written
את
summing
המובאות
up, the court will find quotations in regard to the development of these
פרוידיגר העיד
transactions.
בפניכם על
Freudiger
מזוודות
testified in
מלאות
court
כסף
about the
ותכשיטים
valise
שנמסרו
full
לגברים.
of money and jewelry
זאת אישר גם
handed
קרומאי,
to the Germans. This was
שנחקר בגרמניה.
confirmed by Krumai when interrogated in Germany.
בשלב מסוים
At a
ראה
certain
הימלר
stage, Himmler realized
מיוזמת עצמו
of his own initiative or on the advice given to him by others, the possibility of exploiting this negotiation for private purposes and political purposes, especially that this will enable him to contact the Western allies. This is also the testimony of Kaltenbrunner, and there is no reason to doubt the trustworthiness of these words because this was not in self-defense. And he added, from this moment onwards, Himmler lost grace completely in the eyes of Himmler, because this act did a lot of damage to the Reich abroad. This was also remarked upon by Schellenberg, and this evidence corroborates the version given by Becher immediately after the war. The research carried on at Nuremberg, and then the testimony given by him in this case in Bremen. Becher does not hide the fact that the directions received from Himmler was, promise the Jews what you wish. What we keep is a different matter. That the transaction was first and foremost intended for the political aims of Himmler. Therefore, as is known to us from the Kastner report, Becher saw and regarded this as an important achievement for meeting McClellan, Roosevelt's representative. Therefore, Becher tried to praise Himmler, describe him before Kastner as a trustworthy person and almost as a defender of the Jews against Kaltenbrunner's conspiracies. Therefore, the matter of the transaction was kept secret from the foreign ministry of the German government. Ribbentrop asked angrily the embassy in Budapest, "What is this all about?" when he learnt about the matter from the London Broadcasting Service. 2 months after Brandt was on his way, and then Wesenmeyer answered, embarrassed, trying to find excuses, and relied on Winkelmann and on Grell. The German Foreign Ministry did not know about the transport to Bergen-Belsen, and special notes drawn up for Ribbentrop. This was explained as being an assignment from Himmler to Eichmann. Eichmann was instructed to conduct these negotiations, and this to give it his own personal experience suitable in the dealing with Jews. But he was not told about the top state secret of the transaction, which seemed to him strange and was forced by the order given from above. When questioned by the police, this is what he said. The order was given by Himmler. From whom the idea emanated, Becher or Himmler or from myself, or that it crystallized in some other way, this I do not know. At the same interrogation by the police, he said that he cannot remember a conversation with Brandt, that he has no standing point in regard to the whole episode, and that as far as he was concerned, he cannot be responsible for this matter. And this is what he said to Zassen in the quotation read into the record at session 103, page 17. Such a matter of 10,000 trucks I would not have brought into account at all. I would not have dared to consider such a transaction. It would never have come to my mind. And here, by the way, I wish to add that in contradiction to his argument that the Zassen reports came to make the book interesting and to make it a bestseller, this quotation testifies to the contrary, and these sound to be true words, as well as the lie in his reasoning is glaring from other quotations. It is possible that Eichmann is angry with Becher because he interfered in Jewish matters. He was always angry when anybody tried to interfere in such matters or tried to take them out of his hands, as happened in Holland, when someone from the local authorities tried to intervene and decide in Jewish affairs. He called this in public a folly, as he admitted at the cross-examination. Maybe he was also furious with Becher, who trespassed innocently. But this fury did not rise from any other reason but from his wish and will to be the only and single executor in matters of Jews, at least in the stages of implementation. Hansi Brandt testified here in court. With a clear conscience, I can say that as far as the transaction is concerned, he was satisfied that it did not come through. Wislitzeni related the joy Eichmann expressed when Brandt did not return. And since this happened, Eichmann refused to receive Kastner for further conversations and planned to have him liquidated. Eichmann expected the deal to fall through, and he was ready to contribute to the failure of this transaction without openly showing that he was flunking Himmler's orders. And in order to complete the whole matter, he started the deportations at an accelerated speed. And from the day Brandt left on his way, daily 12,000 men were sent to Auschwitz. And his attitude to the whole chapter he revealed to Zassen in a quotation which is before the court. My heart was never with the opponent. I prefer a dead opponent than a live one. But when I have orders from the Reichsführer to mechanize the 22nd and the 8th Division by 10,000 vehicles, trucks, then let 1 million Jews go to hell. My heart I never asked. I had to ask Germany. In times of emergency, we would have given them 2 million in exchange for 10,000 trucks, because then I would have extracted from this transaction whatever possible. This once again is proof that not all Jews were thrown into the furnaces. They were still there, the Jews. This is the end of the quotation. Eichmann to Zassen. When questioned, he said that he believes his words were corrected slightly. They were retouched, as he said. But these are the precise words describing his attitude, his true attitude to the transaction, his wish to have this transaction fail, as transpires from the report, the Kastner report, from Hansi Brandt's testimony, from that of Becher and Wislitzeny. Did we not hear similar words when Brack of Hitler's chancellery requested a number of trains which he obtained at great trouble only because Brack wants them and wants to throw more idiots into the furnace? This is his style and language. And these are the traces spread all over the manuscript, the Sassen documents. The curses, the crude expressions, and all other ways of expression. The people who are thrown into the furnace are fuel for those furnaces. The dead Jew is always preferable to the live Jew. But when there is an order to leave the Jew alive, and thus two divisions can be equipped to SS divisions, and the time is a time of emergency, then the position is different. This was what Adolf Eichmann said. But all this performance we heard here, that he as Brandt is full of sorrow that the transaction failed. This is duplicity, for which we cannot find a suitable description. And in truth, why should he show any human feelings towards his Jewish opponent when even his own enemies of his own people he was ready to liquidate? He admitted that much on cross-examination, that he proposed to Miller to put up against the wall 100,000 Germans for lack of loyalty to the Führer, and said that only after their own stable is cleaned they will be able to introduce order into other camps. And when I read it to him, the number mentioned was 500,000 Germans, not 100,000. These pearls of speech in Hungary are known from the Kastner report and other evidence. I must purge the provinces from the Jewish manure, he said to Kastner. And if no reply is received within 48 hours, I shall order to throw all this heap of Jewish manure to Budapest. And what did Friedman say about Eichmann's visit to Majdanek when he looked at the prisoners and said, "Remove this heap of manure"? This is Eichmann's language. And later, after this short break and interval in deportations, Eichmann came back to Hungary once again on the 17th of October and told Kastner. This is what the report says. You see, I am back. You hoped in vain that the case of Romania or Bulgaria will be repeated here. The Jews of Budapest will be evacuated. The means of transport are necessary for other purposes. Therefore, they will be removed from Hungary in another way. and the horrors of the foot march are known. Eichmann's responsibility, transparent, are evident from all documents. It is not necessary to repeat. The details will be found in the report, and they are also included in the written part of the summing up. It was known that he was the man to organize this mass murder. It was a known fact to the deportees themselves, as we heard from Mrs. Fleischmann. And she told the court, she related the horrors, the atrocities, about the pigsties where the deportees had to live. The corpses with a yellow patch on their back, on the sideways. And when the blood was still streaming, the furnaces where they took refuge, the young and the old who marched, the pregnant women during the last months of pregnancy who were taken on this march. One of them later in camp, when she was lying in labor, the Lagerführer stood across the room with a torchlight. She was lying on the floor, and he was standing there with his hands on his hips, saying, "I want to watch how a human being is born." And the deportees became weaker from day to day. Disease spread amongst the deportees. The meningitis, the inflammation of the brain, claimed many victims. Hundreds and thousands fell on the way. Court will find the details in Fleischmann's testimony. Eichmann watched the march. He admits this. He saw only 2 dead. But if he saw the march, and he saw the atrocities, the thousands treading in the mud, those dying on the sideways, falling with fatigue, and those shot at by the guards. These were only Jews. There is nothing to be excited about. We heard from his own mouth that this never brought excitement to his heart. This was the end of his action in Hungary. This he described years later to Zassen in the following words. He admitted the truth of this quotation. The Allies bombed the railway stations and the tracks. Then I wanted to show them my mighty arm. Nothing will help you. We shall march. And then came his own words in his own handwriting. He proposed this march. And then he writhed when cross-examined, saying that he only negotiated in regard to food and storehouses for the marchers. Then he retreated, saying that in fact he proposed a different kind of march, not the one which actually took place. And the great lie burst once again when Eichmann speaks of Eichmann in a different quotation in Sassen's document that after the march was carried out, he was congratulated by Andre and Baki, and once again they drank to celebrate the event. This time we know that they had mare's milk brandy to drink. This is how the chapter about Hungary was concluded. These were his last contacts with death. I must add a few words in regard to the chapter of the murder in the cherry orchard. We did not accuse him over the murder of the boy in the indictment, and we did not bring the whole chapter, but to prove his attitude and approach to the life of a Jew. Abraham Gordon, who testified in connection with this matter at the 57th session, described the work at the Ashner Villa. He related about Slavic, about the storeroom for tools, the shed, about Slavic's personality, who always said, "Beware of me." He described the beating up of the boy Solomon, who said that he was removed dead, the amphibious vehicle. He related about Title, who said, "I threw this corpse into the Danube," and told the other boys, "This will be your fate as well." He added and related that he never saw Solomon again. He described the disappearance of Kolbach and the slaps he received from Eichmann. And this tale, this matter of the attempt to assault a girl. The counsel for the defense questioned Gordon in cross-examination, and Eichmann tries to wash his hands of the whole matter. Gordon, in his story, there were two contradictions. Whilst once he said that he told his brother about the whole matter an hour later, he said somewhere else that he told his brother a year later. And whilst once he said that the beating were carried out with a belt, in another place he said that this was done with a heavy instrument. Your Honors, these contradictions are not serious. The counsel for the defense could call the brother to the witness stand and find out when he learned about this incident. Gordon told us about the testimony at the police station in Eilat, and there were difficulties with the policeman who took this evidence, and maybe the year and the hour were mixed up. Gordon made a good impression. He gave his statement to the police on the 15th of June, 60. The number is N1, very near to the time when Eichmann was caught. And of course, before he could have known what Eichmann has to say about the matter, and before he had any possibility or chance to invent tales. He knew details which Eichmann on one hand and Slavic on the second hand do confirm them, as well as Krumai. Villa Ashner, this is correct. He knows the names of Slavic, Title and Kolbach. He knows about the amphibious vehicle. He knows about the work carried out by Jews in the garden. and he knew about the existence of an orchard. So what actually happened? According to Eichmann, this is a story invented from the beginning to the end. But whose story is really the invention? Eichmann testified in court after seeing Krumai's evidence and before he saw Slavik's testimony. So that when Krumai mentions Slavik in his testimony, he also nods and says Slavik was dead as well. But since Krumai does not mention title, he as well cannot recall title. And when he is questioned whether Slavik was the man to supervise the works, he says, yes, this is quite possible. It may have been that he was in charge, but he does not know that Slavik in the meantime testified and described who title was, and that title was in the meantime executed for robbery. Slavik knew about the engineer Kolbach. Eichmann never heard the name before.
We should like to ask the court to give credence to what Gordon says, not because we want incrimination in connection with the murder of the Solomon boy. We did not put this as an item in the indictment. We had no intention to single out this boy from the millions that had been killed. We simply want to shed light on the brutal attitude to a Jewish boy whose act of stealing cherries was enough for Eichmann to be an accomplice, at least, in beating this boy to death. This is his general attitude to Jews, which is clearly brought out here. And this is also is a flagrant contradiction to what he says, that this delicate man was not at all capable of raising his hand on anyone at all.
Will not stand the accused. There is also a third reason. We have seen that he even overstepped his authority beyond and above the orders given to him. He was the spirit, the live spirit in all these actions. He was the man to motivate and to set all this apparatus moving. He pulled the threads. This was not a man who obeyed orders. This was not a man who did only what was demanded of him. He fulfilled the order to the very last and final bitter end. You have hundreds of documents describing any effort of saving a soul, of any intervention, putting them all to nil. The only case where he responded, can you point at it? That he ever tried to mitigate the suffering?
This was the living spirit of extermination. who lent force and vigor to this ghoulish operation. I said he didn't give the supreme orders. He was not the first who gave the orders. But when matters reached implementation stage, there he was undisputed master, and this is where he held sway over all fields of implementation, and he would press and expedite matters, and he did it with enthusiasm and zeal within the framework of orders, and to the highest extent practical, even beyond the framework of those orders. Now we will see how things can be viewed in this trial. The orders to exterminate Jews had never been attired in any form of law. Not that a law like this would have changed anything in this matter. But what was the formal basis for this tremendous operation of instructions, directives, steps, measures which transpire from the ocean of documents? Eichmann told Wisliceny, according to the latter statement, that he has Himmler's written order, saying that the Führer had decided on the extermination of Jews. Eichmann, of course, denied it most energetically. On his part, he was not trying even to testify to any written document whatsoever. But even as we assume in his favor that Wisliceny's statement was correct, then even at that time we have no proof testifying to any legal basis whatsoever. And even if Eichmann had claimed that a German soldier had a duty to obey orders, then even if we take this statement as true, there was no such legal framework, there was no relevant law. And on the other hand, we have a factor which had testified to the act as crime, the very essence of murder, the very essence of herding people and like cattle, the very essence of search warrants, of tracking people like haunted beasts, and all the time amid camouflage and effacing of the traces of murder. The very fact of camouflage shows us quite clearly that what was being done was illegal. What was being done was a hideous crime. If they were not aware of the fact that this was criminal, why then all this camouflage? Why this camouflage? Because the most heinous crimes had even to be concealed from the Reich's authorities. This is what he admits, not because they were better than he was, not because they were no partners, but even to them he didn't have the courage to disclose the whole truth. He was dealing with the work that anybody who engaged in it knew that this was downright crime, whichever way we are going to examine it, whatever principle is to be considered. The accused and his accomplices in this tremendous conspiracy would not boggle at acts which are considered crimes in accordance with military laws. It is enough, for instance, to point to the murder of Jewish prisoners of war, as we heard from witnesses Levinson and The orders came from Berlin to kill everyone. This is what the witnesses said. But some of them were left alive as forced labor slaves. All this had been said by witnesses, and as they said it, this was carried out by the SS. And General Kohler, in accordance with what Judge Musmano says, came to Eichmann and intervened on behalf of the Jewish pilots. What did he hear? They are earmarked for extermination. This was what Eichmann said.
Let me do just a few minutes towards the end. Let me do just...
Can a man with his wits about him say that extermination of Jews in all their various forms could in any way advance the end of the war? Eichmann knew that there was no link whatsoever, no connection whatsoever between the war and the extermination of Jews. But this, of course, he hasn't admitted. But he always tries to resort to some sort of ruses and explanations, saying that Dr. Weizmann, for example, had declared a war on Germany at the Zionist Congress. What did President Weizmann say on that occasion when he bade farewell to the representatives of the people on the eve of the World War II? I'm reading from the protocols of the Zionist Congress then held.
President of Court, this was not submitted in evidence. In any event, you will give us the exact identification of the quote.
Yes, I have a photostatic copy thereof, Your Honor.
President of Court, my colleague, Mr. Justice Halevi, quoted from the Weizmann book.
Therefore, I want to quote from the protocol of the Zionist Congress. Here, these statements are not from Weizmann's memoirs, but from the minutes, and I think this would be perhaps more relevant.
Judge Halevi, I would also have preferred that, but I think that at the stage of the summary, it is a little difficult from a formal point of view.
Then this opportunity of reading this particular statement, but let me say this much.
President of Court, Dr. Savatius, do you have anything to say, sir? As my colleague said, it is a little unusual to admit new material at this stage, but after it had been mentioned by my colleague, of course, it would be preferable to go to the very source. What do you have to say about this, sir?
Ich sehe aber keine Veranlassung, dem zu widersprechen, denn es ist ja bereits vorgetragen und es wird ja nichts Neues eingeführt, sondern nur formell belegt.
President of Court, then, Dr. Savatius, I see no reason to object because this has already been presented here and this is merely a formal reference, I understand.
The fact that Western democracies are waiting for is the minimum for Jewish lives. And their war, therefore, is our war. Their struggle is our struggle. This is what Dr. Weizmann said on the eve of the outbreak of the Second World War. But the Nazis didn't see a belligerent in the Jews. What a pity they didn't see the belligerent in the Jews. What a pity that they hadn't taken the Jews to the POW camp. Had they done so, millions of Jews would have perhaps been saved. But they did exactly the opposite, the glaring opposite of it. They wanted to exterminate the Jews root and branch as long as the war was on, because they knew that this was the opportunity which they shouldn't miss. This is what Eichmann said quite clearly and unequivocally to Wislitzeny. And also the German Foreign Ministry gave expression to this very same idea, that the war gives the Germans the possibility and duty to solve the Jewish problem in Europe. And Wislitzeny furthermore stated as follows: the more the war is continued, the more it is clear that the war is going to be lost, the more Eichmann insisted on expediting extermination and fulfilling it up to the hilt.
Therefore, it is clear that after he and his men were taken prisoners, his loyal burgher, as he calls him, asked him to leave his friends, to keep a distance from them, as he himself admits, because he, Eichmann, was considered one of the chief war criminals. And as he told Krell as far back as that time in Budapest, that he had 6 million souls on his conscience. And on this occasion I wish to correct something which a slip of the tongue which I made yesterday. He did not tell Grell that he had 6 million Jews on his conscience. He said 6 million souls. But who it was that was on his conscience, and who the 6 million are whom he could have had in mind, there can be no doubt about this. In the police interrogation as well, he said 6 million Jews. He did not jump laughingly into the grave as he had promised Wislitzeny, and I shall have something to say about this too. Instead, he tried as best he could to flee from justice, because he knew the weight of his crime. He knew that he had no defense and no justification for his acts, and therefore he fled and went into hiding. And when we deal with this matter of the illegal order, the matter of conspiracy also assumes a different form, because after all, defense counsel may ask, what is your argument? Are you claiming that some kind of a private in the Einsatzgruppen, somewhere in the vastness of Russia, is a co-conspirator with Heydrich or Himmler or Hitler? Can one really argue that there exists such a conspiracy? That this conspiracy can cover all stages and ranks and positions? And our answer is yes, to the extent that one deals with the central people in the execution, the men who are engaged in illegal work, then the conspiracy works upward and downward towards those who give the orders and those who are subordinated to them. And the criminal conspiracy exists from the central nerve center of the Gestapo. It has ramifications upwards to Heydrich and to Himmler, and downwards, down to the last man. However, on condition that this person had full knowledge of what was taking place, and on condition that this person remained in the criminal framework and in this nerve center after he had learned what the purpose was. And we heard this from Eichmann himself in August or September 1941. He says, Heydrich informed me the Führer has ordered the physical extermination of the Jews. And from that moment onward, he was caught in the net of the criminal conspiracy toward Heydrich, toward his subordinates, and towards all the others who were dealing in the thousands of little conspiracies which existed in every ghetto, in every community, in every country, big and small, for the implementation of the overall task. And